In almost every industry imaginable, competition makes everybody better, but for the past 18 years, WWE's pretty much had a monopoly on pro wrestling after the death of WCW, at least in North America. There have been a few companies here and there, but at no point during even their best days have they ever come close to being a viable alternative to WWE. TNA came the closest, but even with their impressive roster, TV deal, and respectable funding, they still couldn't touch Vince McMahon's empire. And while you might have personally preferred some of these promotions over the past 18 years, WWE's still always had more money than all these other promotions combined. And on top of that, they just have way too much history behind them to where a lot of people don't even say pro wrestling anymore. They just call it WWE like how a lot of people call hot tubs jacuzzis. So saying they've had a monopoly over pro wrestling really isn't that much of a stretch. And for the longest time, it seemed impossible that another promotion could ever truly rival them again. That is, however, until the recent formation of All Elite Wrestling. And in case you don't know what AEW is, it's basically a new promotion that started when a group of wrestlers known as the Elite caught fire in New Japan and Ring of Honor, who then started a YouTube series that kept growing more and more in popularity. Fast forward a few years later, and they were able to have the best-selling shirts at Hot Topic, and then they ran the first non-WWE event in North America to sell 10,000 tickets since WCW with the pay-per-view appropriately titled All In. Some would argue that Ring of Honor and New Japan deserve credit for the sellout, but even though the show would absolutely not have been as good without their involvement, the fact is that the show sold out in less than 30 minutes before any matches were even announced. So no matter how you look at it, there was no denying that the Elite had a lot of potential. And this potential was noticed by a longtime wrestling fan named Tony Khan, who's co-owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And due to the success of All In, he was able to convince his father, Shad Khan, who has more than twice as much money as Vince McMahon, to invest in a new wrestling promotion. Hence the birth of All Elite Wrestling. Granted, Shad Khan's not going to be investing his entire fortune into the venture, but he has invested enough money for WWE to start offering the wrestlers more money to prevent them from jumping ship, and to close a deal with TNT for a primetime TV spot, which does in fact make AEW competition to WWE regardless of what anybody says. And that just might be the best thing to happen to pro wrestling possibly ever. Why is that, you ask? Well, WWE being the only show in town's really hurt the quality of their product. And don't get me wrong, I'm not another jaded wrestling fan who's hated everything WWE's done since WCW's demise. There's definitely been a lot of stuff that I've loved, but without competition, things have just never been the same. Because not only does WWE have less urgency to try as hard with their product anymore, but for 18 years, the perception's been that if you're a professional wrestler, then you need to work in WWE at all costs if you expect to make a decent living. This mentality led to wrestlers having virtually no leverage over their careers, and they just kinda had to hope for the best while worrying more about backstage politics than simply perfecting their art.
Well, don't piss anybody off.
Like I said, WWE's had plenty of great moments in the Monopoly era, but according to pretty much every writer who's ever worked there, their main goal's always been to amuse the company's owner above all else. Which is the main reason why WWE's audience has been dwindling more and more with each passing year. Some people think it's because the shows have gotten too long, but straight up, if the shows were better, people would still watch. In fact, the longer shows have actually been making WWE more money than ever before, so believe it or not, I'm actually not going to hold that against them. I mean, after all, they are a business. But when the shows are getting longer and worse, then it's certainly going to drive more fans away in the long run, even if it does make them ass loads of money in the short term. And WWE losing its audience is definitely not good for pro wrestling as a whole. But as long as AEW proves to be successful, then WWE is going to have to improve their product, which is obviously great for the wrestlers who've all been making more money, and most importantly great for the fans who are no doubt going to see better wrestling. So you'd think that fans all over the world would be happy AEW exists, right? Well, not exactly. There's actually a lot of fans who desperately want AEW to fail. So for the past few days or so, myself and many top scientists have been trying our best to figure out why people who consider themselves wrestling fans would want AEW to fail. And what it ultimately comes down to are three key reasons, with the first one being that many of these fans just don't like the Elite. I'm a huge fan of them myself personally, because they could all put on fantastic matches while at the same time knowing how and more importantly when to be entertaining. Some detractors don't like their brand of humor at all, while others think they don't take themselves seriously enough with the mentality that funny doesn't draw money. But personally, I prefer the humor of being the Elite over Natalia's fart gimmick or whatever's going on with the revival. And I think that more often than not, finding the sweet spot between serious and funny proves to be successful in any form of entertainment. I mean, just look at how successful the MCU is. Those movies can get pretty epic, but they usually know when to reel it back in with a joke or two. And if you don't think that top guys in wrestling can be funny and serious, then just look at The Rock and Stone Cold. Half of what made those characters so popular was their ability to entertain, which usually involved humor, and the other half of that formula is that they could become badasses and have you take them seriously whenever it was needed. I know there's a lot of legendary wrestlers that were always serious, but if you ask me, I think balancing entertainment and seriousness is why The Rock and Austin are at the tippity top. Don't get me wrong though, I'm certainly not saying that anybody in the elite's on the level of Stone Cold or The Rock. I'm just giving you my personal take, and I think they're on the right track. But not everyone agrees with me, and there's plenty of people who just can't forgive Kenny Omega for wrestling a blow-up doll like 87 years ago. But these very same people seem to have no problem with moves like the People's Elbow or the Catapult, or the fact that Lance Storm once had to lose to midgets in his early days. If you ask me, holding a grudge against Kenny Omega for that would be like hating Jim Carrey in serious movies just because he came out of Terry Garron's ass in Ace Ventura 2. I know there's better examples I could have used, but I really wanted to use that clip. Besides, you get the point. Regardless of whether or not you like the Elite though, there's still plenty of other members of AEW's roster. But if you hate every single person in that company, then I'm not saying you should just force yourself to watch it just for the sake of helping wrestling. Because it is AEW's job to convince you to support them. And if they fail at doing that, then you should find your entertainment elsewhere, period. All I'm saying is that if you consider yourself a fan, then you shouldn't want them to fail. Because the reason for WWE's best years is due to the success of WCW forcing them to try harder. And if you don't believe me, then watch just about any episode of Raw from 1995. Much like today, there were a few good moments sprinkled in here and there, and maybe there's like 2 or 3 people out there who prefer their wrestlers be garbage men or evil dentists. But I'm pretty sure most would agree that WCW changed WWE for the better. And given the record low ratings for Raw and SmackDown lately, I'd imagine that most diehard WWE fans want changes made. But not all fans who want AEW to fail necessarily dislike the wrestlers. In fact, many of them are even fans. But the idea of a wrestling company being in the same conversation as WWE has been seen as an impossibility for 18 years. That's longer than a lot of fans can remember or have even been alive. So with all the companies that haven't been able to compete with WWE since 2001, the safest bet's that AEW will be no different. A lot of people have gotten their hopes up a few times over the years and probably just don't want to be burned again. And it's one thing to say that you want AEW to succeed but don't think it will, which I do think's the case for most of these fans who just don't want to be disappointed. But when I hear a lot of these people talking about it, it just kind of comes off as them wanting it to fail deep down, if for no other reason than to not want someone else to accomplish something they shouldn't be able to. Because a lot of negative people just feel more comfortable with themselves about being right about something bad happening rather than being wrong about something good happening. I'm not sure if it's because they fear change is something they thought they knew, or if they're just being dicks. But according to my crack team of, science people or whatever, these 2 groups of people only make up a small portion of AEW's haters. While the third category of people who want AEW to fail may also fall into the first 2 categories, the only thing for sure is that the majority of people who want AEW to fail were just straight up brainwashed by WWE to believe that any other form of wrestling is just pure trash meant for bingo halls. Most of WWE's wrestlers even thought this for a while, and it's really not that hard to fathom given their history, amount of money, and how insanely high their production value is. But if WWE really thought that all other wrestling's trash, then why is one of the main selling points of their network the fact that it has so much content from other promotions? Also, why do they go through so much trouble to bring stars over from other companies as often as they do? I'm not saying other promotions are better or worse than WWE, but it's clear that they don't want you to know that there's alternatives out there. And it's pretty hilarious to see how far they go to cover other companies up sometimes. And if you go into the comments section of pretty much anything that has to do with AEW, then you'll see that WWE did a pretty good job at convincing everybody that they're the end-all be-all. And to some extent, they've even convinced some fans that other promotions are the enemy trying to put WWE out of business. I don't think anybody thinks that'll actually happen, but to some hardcore WWE fans, AEW getting a huge financial backing and a TV deal with TNT means they're trying to kill WWE. But no matter how much you dislike either product, nobody should want either company to go out of business. And despite how down I am on WWE lately, I still do love them. In fact, my favorite wrestling show at the moment's NXT. And because of how great NXT's been without serious competition, there is a chance that even without AEW's existence, that WWE would eventually improve if and when Triple H gains more power over the main roster. But if AEW is successful, then there's no doubt that it'll hasten changes in WWE, which is what anybody who considers themselves a fan should be hoping for, even if you like WWE right now. Because both companies succeeding is obviously great for both of them, as well as the fans, and even Impact, Ring of Honor, and New Japan. Why do you think some fans want to see AEW fail, though? Is there anything I missed, or do you not agree? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll try my goddamnedest to respond to everybody. If you enjoyed this video, then click the like button to show support, and subscribe to see more of my silliness. My name's Kayfabe Cameron, and I'll see you next time.